The sun rose slowly over the weathered rooftops of Dry Creek, spilling pale gold across the wooden sidewalks and dusty streets. A soft wind stirred the prairie grass beyond the town limits, carrying with it whispers of the previous night's gossip. The sound of hooves clattering on uneven boards echoed faintly, blending with the murmur of townsfolk gathering in the square. Emma walked quietly past the general store, her hand lightly brushing the railing, eyes lowered as she navigated the stares of neighbors who murmured behind their hands. She felt their judgment like a tangible weight pressing against her shoulders. Her rounded belly, hidden beneath a simple cotton dress, made her every step feel heavier, not from the pregnancy alone, but from the invisible chains of shame and suspicion. An elderly neighbor, Mrs. Halloway, waved from the steps of her porch. "Good morning, Emma," she called softly, her voice warm yet hesitant. Emma offered a faint smile, nodding as she carried a basket of bread across the street. She knelt to help a child retrieve a runaway puppy, brushing strands of wind-tossed hair from her face. These small acts of kindness were her shield against the harshness of whispers and pointed looks. Her father's carriage appeared at the far end of the street, splintering the quiet with the clatter of wheels on stone. His face, red with anger and humiliation, twisted as he jumped down. "Emma, come here this instant." His voice carried authority, dripping with shame and frustration. The townsfolk paused mid-gossip, their whispers turning into a tense silence. Emma's heart sank, but she forced herself to stand tall, clutching the basket as her knuckles turned white. "Father," her voice was soft, almost pleading, yet steady enough to resist the tremor of fear. "I've had enough of this," he barked, stepping closer. "The council has agreed you will leave Dry Creek immediately. Your situation will not taint the family name." His eyes burned with self-righteous fury. Emma swallowed hard, the weight of abandonment and judgment pressing on her chest. She forced a smile she did not feel, lifting her gaze to the horizon where the first light of dawn met the endless prairie. From the church steps across the street, a shadow emerged. Luke, a broad-shouldered cowboy with a weathered hat pulled low over his eyes, observed the scene silently. His dark eyes lingered on Emma, noting the tremor in her hands, the hesitation in her posture. He did not approach yet, letting the wind carry the distant sound of horse hooves and murmured outrage. Emma's gaze caught his for a brief moment, a quiet, charged meeting of eyes. Her sorrow met his calm, unwavering focus. In that instant, a spark of curiosity and tentative hope flickered in her chest. She did not know who he was, yet the subtle strength in his stance whispered promise of protection, of someone who might see her not as a scandal, but as a woman of quiet courage. The town council convened in the square, voices blending with the creak of wooden signs swinging in the wind. Emma's father gestured toward her as if she were a storm cloud about to break. She clenched her jaw, pressing the basket to her chest, and turned slightly to glance at Luke once more. Their eyes met again, just for a heartbeat, before she looked away, facing the inevitable. The whispers resumed, softer now, carrying fear, judgment, and curiosity alike. Emma felt the sting of isolation, yet beneath it, a tiny ember of strength glowed. She would not break, not today, not here. And somewhere in the distance, Luke's eyes never left her, a silent promise waiting for the right moment to ride into her life. The sky over Dry Creek darkened, the sun dimming behind thick gray clouds rolling over the prairie. Emma sat at the worn wooden desk in her cabin, journal open, quill trembling between her fingers. She wrote slowly, each word a tentative confession of fear and longing. "If I leave, who will care for my child? Who will see me for more than the mistake I've made?" The paper absorbed her sorrow, yet could not ease the heaviness in her chest. A soft breeze drifted through the open window, carrying the scent of rain and distant thunder. Emma brushed her hair in front of the cracked mirror, eyes stinging with unshed tears. She paused, staring at her reflection, the pale face framed by dark hair, the swelling belly beneath the modest dress, the quiet courage in her eyes. "I cannot leave. Not now. Not ever," she whispered, tracing her hand over the rounded curve of her abdomen. Outside, the town buzzed with whispers. Rumors of her impending banishment spread faster than the prairie wind. And yet, amidst the judgment, a presence moved silently, unnoticed by all but her. Luke, the cowboy with the watchful eyes, left small tokens of care, a freshly repaired section of fence where the wind had torn planks, a loaf of warm bread on her doorstep, a jug of water neatly placed by the cabin door. Each gesture was wordless but deliberate, building trust in quiet increments. Emma noticed these acts with cautious gratitude, a flicker of hope igniting in her heart. She caught glimpses of Luke in the streets, always distant, always observing, never intruding. The townsfolk, ever wary, whispered behind their hands, "Why is he helping her? Is he or looking for scandal?" Their suspicion made Luke's silent support even more precious, a rare pocket of kindness in a town steeped in judgment. That evening, as the first drops of a prairie storm began to fall, Emma's anxiety spiked. She had been tending the small hearth when the wind began to howl, rattling the cabin walls and sending dust swirling across the wooden floor. The sky opened in a sudden torrent, rain lashing against the windows like a barrage of needles. Panic. Roshi was alone, the town streets deserted, the storm cutting her off from any hope of help. A sudden, steady knock on the door startled her. She hesitated, heart racing, until a deep voice called through the rain, "Emma, it's Luke. You're not facing this alone." Without waiting for an invitation, he stepped into the cabin, water dripping from the brim of his hat, eyes soft but resolute. He stacked firewood carefully, building warmth between them, and handed her a thick blanket. They sat near the fire, the flickering light painting their faces in gold and shadow. Silence stretched at first, comfortable, and waited, before Luke spoke, his voice low. "You're stronger than anyone here gives you credit for. I've seen it." Emma looked down, cheeks flushed, yet felt the steady assurance in his tone. I don't know if I can trust anyone," she admitted, voice trembling. Luke's hand brushed hers accidentally as he passed a mug of steaming tea. Neither withdrew. The gesture lingered, heavy with unspoken understanding. "Then start with me," he said simply. Emma felt a pulse of gratitude and something more, a tender stirring of hope that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone in facing the storm. Outside, the wind screamed, carrying the town's doubts and judgment like a physical weight. But inside the cabin, amid the warmth of firelight and quiet conversation, Emma felt a fragile shield forming around her heart. Luke's protective presence, the soft cadence of his words, and the subtle bravery in his gaze made her believe, if only for a moment, that the world might bend in her favor. The storm raged into the night, lightning illuminating the prairie and thunder shaking the earth, yet the cabin remained a haven. Emma's eyes met Luke's across the small hearth, a silent understanding passing between them. He did not promise to fix the town or erase the whispers, but he offered something perhaps more powerful, steadfast presence and unwavering support in that moment. As rain pelted the wooden walls and firelight danced across their faces, Emma felt the first glimmer of trust and longing intertwine. The prairie outside remained wild and unpredictable, but inside, a quiet bond began to form. Fragile yet real, a slow-burning connection against the backdrop of storm clouds and secrets. That morning sun spilled golden light across Dry Creek, dust motes dancing in the beams as Emma pushed open the door to the small orphanage. Children's laughter filled the room, a fragile joy amid their sparse. Emma knelt to tie a little boy's worn boot, her fingers brushing his, her smile gentle but determined. Each act of care was a quiet rebellion against the shame she carried. Even as townsfolk whispered outside the windows, she ignored them. She distributed food, patched tattered clothing, and told stories that coaxed giggles from shy children. Their innocent admiration filled her heart with a warmth stronger than fear. For the first time in weeks, she felt the weight of gossip lighter, not gone, but countered by purpose. Meanwhile, Luke's presence grew steadily more tangible. During long rides across the prairie, he spoke of quiet hardships and personal losses. Stories told without complaint but with honesty. "I lost my brother to a fever one winter," he admitted one evening as dusk painted the sky in deep oranges. "I've spent a lifetime learning that sometimes courage is just showing up, day after day." Emma listened, captivated not just by the story, but by the way he shared it with such gentle strength. Later, in the church kitchen, Emma reached for a sack of flour just as Luke did the same. Their hands brushed, a spark passing between them, subtle yet undeniable. Neither withdrew immediately. The moment stretched, filled with the aroma of baking bread, sun slanting through dusty windows, and unspoken understanding. Their eyes met, fleeting smiles tugging at the corners of their lips. Romance began to grow, not in grand gestures, but in these quiet, intimate exchanges. Tension, however, could not be held at bay forever. Emma's father appeared suddenly in the town square later that day, face red with anger. "Emma, how dare you parade your shame in front of these people?" he barked, attempting to humiliate her in public once again. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as he gestured toward her, expecting her to bow, cower, or flee. Emma inhaled, steadying herself. She did not retreat. Her chin lifted, her voice calm but firm. "I am not a mistake to be hidden, Father. I am my own woman, and I will not be defined by your fear." The words carried across the square, echoing against wooden storefronts and stirring a ripple of admiration among the townsfolk. Luke stepped forward, placing himself protectively beside her. The crowd took note, a steadfast man standing by a young woman, unwavering against intimidation. His hand brushed briefly against hers, a silent anchor. Emma's gaze met his, gratitude and unspoken trust passing between them. Together, they formed a quiet barrier against scorn, a united front of strength and integrity. Slowly, the town began to shift. Some elders averted their eyes, others nodded discreetly, recognizing courage in its simplest form. Emma continued her daily acts of kindness, undeterred by whispers, and Luke's quiet support never wavered. Each smile she coaxed from a child, each repaired fence or bread delivered, each shared glance with Luke, built an invisible bridge between her and the skeptical townsfolk. By evening, as the sun sank low over the prairie, Emma stood at the edge of town, the wind catching her dress and hair. She turned toward the horizon, feeling the first real spark of self. Luke rode up beside her, horse's hooves soft against the dust. He tipped his hat, his eyes locking with hers. "You're doing more than surviving," he said quietly. "You're teaching them all what true courage looks like." Emma allowed herself a small, genuine smile. The path ahead remained uncertain, but for the first time, she felt empowered. And with Luke beside her, she realized that courage and love could grow together, quietly but powerfully, like prairie grass after a storm. The sky over Dry Creek blazed in streaks of orange, deep purple, and soft rose, casting long shadows over the undulating prairie. Emma stood near the edge of town, hands resting lightly on the wooden fence, feeling the gentle evening breeze ruffle her hair. Her thoughts wandered, heavy with the day's struggles and the persistent weight of whispers that followed her like a shadow. From the distance came the rhythmic sound of hooves striking the dust. Luke emerged from the horizon, silhouetted against the burning sky, his horse steady beneath him. He rode closer, dismounting with effortless grace, his hat tipped back slightly, revealing eyes that reflected the fading light, warm, steady, and intent. "Emma," he said softly, his voice carrying across the quiet prairie. She turned, heart tightening as she met his gaze. There was no judgment in his eyes, only recognition, a quiet acknowledgement of her courage, her strength, and the hardships she had endured. I don't know if she began, hesitation faltering under the weight of tradition and fear of gossip. Luke approached slowly, leaving a respectful distance between them, yet closing the gap enough for intimacy. "I'm not here to save you," he said, tone gentle but unwavering. "I'm here because I've seen who you are, not the shame they try to place on you, not the whispers. I see your strength, your heart, and I want to stand beside you, always." He knelt slightly, his hand brushing hers as he extended a simple, worn ring. "Marry me, Emma, not because you need saving, but because I want to honor the woman you are." Her breath caught. The prairie wind seemed to pause, carrying only the distant cry of a hawk. Emma's fingers trembled slightly as she touched his hand, the sincerity in his eyes piercing through the fear that had held her captive. She wanted to believe him, but the weight of scandal, of gossip, of family expectation pressed against her chest. She whispered, searching for words that felt honest. Luke leaned closer, offering the warmth of his coat and the security of his presence. "It's your choice," he said, voice steady, "and I'll wait." His thumb brushed the back of her hand in the gentlest gesture of reassurance. They spoke then not of the town, not of shame, but of dreams, hopes, and quiet fears. Luke shared stories of the prairie, of nights spent under endless stars, and of the losses that shaped him. Emma spoke of the child she carried, the life she wanted to build, and the courage she hoped to nurture. With every word, every glance, every fleeting touch, a bond formed, quiet and unshakable. Back in town, the news of Luke's intention spread like wildfire. Some elders shook their heads, muttering about propriety and tradition, their faces red with disapproval. Others observed in silence, slowly recognizing the bravery it took to honor love and character over judgment. Even Emma's mother, initially cold and distant, softened as she watched her daughter stand with dignity and see a man willing to respect her fully. the sun sank lower, casting a golden path across the prairie. Emma finally allowed herself to smile, a small, hesitant, yet genuine expression. Luke mirrored it, tipping his hat slightly, eyes glimmering with quiet pride and affection. In that moment, the world felt balanced between challenge and hope. Gossip might linger, tradition might frown, but Emma and Luke had found a place where trust, courage, and love converged. The prairie wind carried promise that love could thrive even in a town slow to forgive, and that two hearts, willing to honor one another, could shape the story for themselves. Emma's gaze met Luke's once more, and in the lingering warmth between them, she felt a quiet certainty. Perhaps the world could bend to hope. After Alan together, they would see it through. Dark clouds gathered over Dry Creek, rolling low and heavy across the prairie. The wind whipped through the streets, sending dust spiraling in ghostly swirls around the wooden sidewalks. Townsfolk hurried to the square, murmuring with anticipation, as Emma's father strode toward the town hall, flanked by a small group of supporters. His face was red with anger, his voice carrying accusations that seemed to echo through the tense air. "This ends today," he bellowed, gesturing toward Emma, who stood at the edge of the hall's steps. "No child born out of wedlock will dishonor this town. Not on my watch." Emma's stomach tightened, but she squared her shoulders. She had faced whispers, judgment, and fear, and she would not bow now. Luke stood quietly beside her, calm and steady, his presence a protective anchor. The townsfolk noticed the juxtaposition. A young woman exuding quiet strength, paired with a man whose loyalty and calm confidence lent weight to her courage. Taking a deep breath, Emma stepped forward. "Father, I am proud of the life growing inside me," she said, voice ringing across the square despite the rising wind. "I am proud of the choices I've made, and I will live without shame, because this child is a blessing, not a crime. I will not let fear or gossip define me." A hush fell over the crowd as dust swirled around them, lightning flashing faintly on the horizon. The storm mirrored the tension in the square, wild and unpredictable, yet contained within the frame of her steadfast presence. Luke's hand brushed against hers subtly, grounding her, lending silent support that her father's face tightened, disbelief etched in every line. But Emma did not falter. "We do not have to live in judgment and fear," she continued, eyes sweeping across the crowd. "We can choose kindness, understanding, and respect. I stand here because I have learned courage and I will not hide from it." Luke nodded beside her, voice quiet but firm. "I've seen her courage, I've seen her heart, and I will not stand by silently while others question her worth." The townsfolk listened, the weight of their own judgments pressing against their conscience. Slowly, the storm began to abate, as though responding to her bravery. Rain tapered off to a drizzle, and the sun's one light filtered through the clouds, casting a soft glow over the streets. A few townspeople exchanged nods of respect. A child stepped forward to grasp Emma's hand, and an elder, previously scowling, gave a tentative, approving smile. Emma exhaled, tension melting from her shoulders. She had faced the storm, both literal and figurative, and emerged unbroken. Luke squeezed her hand gently, eyes reflecting pride and affection. Together, they had not only confronted the town's disapproval, but had also inspired a subtle shift in perception. The wind softened, carrying whispers of admiration rather than scorn. Dust settled around their boots, leaving the streets clearer, the town metaphorically cleansed of judgment. Emma's posture remained strong, her gaze steady on the horizon, knowing that this storm, like so many trials before, had only fortified her resolve, that as they turned to leave, the townsfolk slowly parted to make way, murmurs now tinged with respect, small gestures, a nod from a shopkeeper, a child waving hinted that acceptance, once distant, had begun to root. Emma and Luke walked side by side, the prairie stretching wide before them, hearts aligned and courage shared. The prairie stretched wide beneath a sky ablaze with amber and rose, soft light spilling over swaying grasses that whispered in the gentle wind. Emma stood at the edge of a small meadow, heart steady but full, her hands lightly clasped in front of her. Around her, only a handful of townsfolk had gathered, faces quiet with reverence rather than spectacle. The distant toll of a church bell marked the passing of time, carrying an almost sacred rhythm across the open land. Luke approached, his horse's hooves stirring small clouds of dust, his broad shoulders outlined by the glowing sunset. He dismounted, removing his hat and letting the breeze ruffle his hair. Their eyes met, and in that instant, all the trials, whispers, and storms of Dry Creek seemed to fall away. "Emma," he said softly, voice blending with the prairie wind, "from the moment I saw you, I knew. I wanted to stand by you, through dust and storms, through whispers and judgment. I want to walk with you in all the days ahead." Emma's lips curved in a gentle smile. "Luke, I never thought I'd feel safe enough to hope, to love openly. But with you, I do. I feel strong, seen, and free." They exchanged vows quietly, intimately. Each word carried meaning beyond ceremony, promises of respect, partnership, and unwavering support. When their hands finally met, fingers entwining, it was a touch full of warmth and understanding. The sun's rays caught on their joined hands, casting long shadows across the meadow like a silent witness to their bond. A light breeze stirred, carrying the scent of wildflowers and tall grass. Emma laughed softly at a shared joke, the sound light and unburdened, echoing like music across the open land. Luke's steady presence complemented her joy, a mirror of gentle strength to her radiant resilience. A subtle brush of hands, a lingering glance, and the comfort of leaning close in silence spoke volumes more than words could. Around them, the small gathering of townsfolk watched quietly. Some nodded in approval, others simply smiled, feeling the authenticity of the moment. Tradition and judgment had been set aside. What mattered now was courage, love, and truth. Emma's mother, standing at the edge of the group, allowed a faint smile, a tear glinting in her aged gesture of acceptance and pride. As the ceremony concluded, Emma and Luke mounted their horses, riding side by side across the golden prairie. The wind caught their hair, rustling the grass in waves, and the horizon stretched endlessly before them. Emma rested a hand on her belly, feeling the life growing within her, a symbol of hope and new beginnings. Luke's arm brushed hers, protective and tender, their fingers brushing intermittently as if testing the permanence of their bond. The camera lingers on subtle details, the shimmer of sunlight on Emma's hair, Luke's quiet smile, the faintest glimmer of tears in her eyes, their intertwined hands against the vast, open prairie. Each element captures a cinematic sense of completion, a gentle, earned fulfillment of love, courage, and resilience. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in the deepest purples and soft golds, they rode together into the distance. Their silhouettes merged with the sweeping prairie, leaving the audience with a lingering sense of peace, hope, and quiet triumph. The story had come full circle, from heartbreak, judgment, and fear, to empowerment, love, and a future filled with promise.